My daughter is breastfeeding the baby I had with her boyfriend, and she has no idea that the child is her brother. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to carry a secret that could shatter my entire family. Yet here I am, living it, feeling every heartbeat of it in a way that's impossible to ignore. It started months ago, on a day that seemed ordinary but would unravel everything I thought I knew about trust, love, and betrayal. I'm a mother. I've always prided myself on being there for my children, on making sure they felt safe, seen, and loved. I never imagined that one day, the lines between protector and sinner could blur so drastically. My daughter, Lila, is 22. She's vibrant, stubborn, and fiercely independent, the kind of girl who leaves footprints on your heart just by walking across a room. She has a little boy of her own, Aaron, and she's been navigating motherhood with this blend of fierce love and barely contained exhaustion. Watching her, I felt proud and a little envious, though I'd never admit it out loud. The first hint of the chaos that would consume us started with a relationship. Lila's boyfriend, Jason, came into our lives when she was 19. He was charming, charismatic, and polite, at least on the surface. I met him at family dinners, always careful to measure my words, to stay within the bounds of propriety. But I won't lie, the first time I saw him, I felt a stir of something I couldn't name, something that didn't feel right. I pushed it aside, told myself it was nothing. It was months later, when I was overwhelmed with the pressures of life and loneliness gnawed at the edges of my patience, that I made a mistake. A mistake I'll carry with me forever. The details don't matter as much as the consequences. I became pregnant. Alone. With the one person I should never have crossed a line with, my daughter's boyfriend. I was terrified. The thought of telling anyone, my husband, my children, made my stomach twist into knots. I didn't know how I could bear their disgust, their anger, the sense of betrayal that would undoubtedly boil over. But the pregnancy moved forward, undeniable and relentless. I went to the doctor, confirmed the heartbeat, and tried to imagine a life in which this could somehow be okay. Then came the complications. I didn't produce milk. I didn't understand why at first. My body had always been capable, always given without question. But now, no matter how much I tried, I couldn't feed my child. I watched my belly grow, my anxiety swelling alongside it, thinking about what it would mean when the baby arrived. How could I care for her the way a mother should? How could I explain this? It was Lila who stepped in. At first, she didn't know the full extent of what was happening. She saw me struggling, exhausted and drained, and without hesitation, offered to help. She had experience. She had Aaron. She knew how to feed a child, how to nurture them, how to give what I couldn't. And so she became the bridge between my daughter's life and my own, breastfeeding the baby I had brought into the world. My baby, her little sister. I watched from the sidelines, heart in my throat, as Lila cradled the child I had created, feeding her with a love I both revered and envied. I tried to contain myself, to smile and appear normal, but every glance, every gentle touch, tore at my soul. And the worst part, the unbearable part one couldn't confess, was that Jason, the father of this child, was still in our lives. Lila had no idea, not a clue. Every laugh, every shared secret between them, every moment of trust she placed in him was a knife twisting in my chest. I kept it hidden, careful to never let my expression betray the truth. I watched her, and I loved her, and I hated myself for what I'd done. It was a delicate balance of devotion and destruction, of pride and shame. Every time she looked at me with gratitude, I wanted to scream, to run away, to undo everything. But the world moves forward, and so did we. The baby grew. Lila's patience and care never wavered. She was a lifeline I didn't deserve, and every night I whispered apologies to a child who couldn't understand the weight of what she was receiving from her sister, unknowingly nourished by someone she trusted completely. The tension was unbearable. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly, couldn't look at Jason without my stomach churning. He was charming, always polite, always careful to avoid suspicion. Sometimes I wanted to confront him, to scream, to demand that he acknowledge what he'd done, but I knew it would be worse for everyone, especially for Lila, who loved him with a naive intensity one used to admire. And so I kept the secret, like a living thing inside me, feeding on every interaction, every moment, every laugh and cry that passed between them. There were nights when I'd lie awake, listening to Lila hum softly to the baby, the room warm with the soft scent of baby powder and milk. My child, my daughter, was in her arms, and I felt both gratitude and an unbearable guilt. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hair, to smell the sweetness of her skin, but I couldn't. I was a ghost in my own home, watching the life I'd created be nurtured by someone else, by my own daughter. And yet, Even as I felt the crushing weight of my mistake, there was a twisted sort of relief. My child was being cared for. She was alive. She was fed. She was loved. And in a way, that had to be enough. It had to be. For now, anyway. But I knew, deep down, that the truth was a ticking time bomb. A single word, a single slip, and everything could come crashing down. Lila's trust, my family's bonds, the fragile peace we'd managed to maintain. I hated myself, but I loved her too much to let the truth destroy her world before it had to. I convinced myself that some secrets were worth carrying, even if it meant living in a constant state of quiet torment. And so every day I smiled. I complimented Lila's care. I offered gentle encouragement. I watched her rock the baby to sleep and felt the thrum of my own heartbreak with every gentle hum she whispered into the night. I don't know how long I can keep it up. I don't know how long I can live with this poison in my veins and still pretend that everything is normal. But for now, I do what any mother would do. I survive, I love, and I endure because my child needs me, even if in the shadows. I still remember what happened right after that moment, the first time I realized how fragile the balance I'd built really was. It was late one evening, and I just finished putting my baby down for a nap. Lila was in the living room, gently bouncing my child against her chest while humming that soft tune she always sang. The warmth of the lamplight pooled around them, and for a moment, I almost allowed myself to forget everything. Almost. Jason was there too, sitting on the couch with his usual easy smile, talking to Lila about something trivial, plans for the weekend, a new game for Aaron, some mundane thing I couldn't fully focus on because my mind was a storm of guilt and fear. And then it happened. He reached over, brushing a stray lock of hair from my daughter's forehead, his hand lingering a moment too long, his eyes soft and familiar in a way that made my stomach twist violently. That's when the realization hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. Lila, completely unaware, trusted him with the very thing he'd taken from me, her mother's secret, her innocence, her love. And worse, she trusted him with the life of my baby, her little sister, who had his blood running through her veins. I wanted to speak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse and tell Lila everything, to unburden myself of a secret that had become both a curse and a weight I couldn't lift. But I couldn't. Not yet. Every instinct I had screamed at me that revealing the truth now would destroy her, would shatter everything. And so I stayed silent, swallowing back the bile of guilt and fear that rose in my throat. The days blurred together after that night. Lila continued her careful, loving routine, feeding my baby, bathing her, rocking her to sleep, and I watched from the edges of every room. My heart ached in a way I didn't even know was possible. There were moments when I thought I might break, a misstep, a cough, a glance too long, and the truth could slip out. And yet, Jason remained blissfully unaware that I knew the secret he carried, that I knew he was the father. He acted like everything was normal, like the life we were all pretending to live wasn't built on lies so deep they threatened to drown us all. Then came the day that changed everything. Lila had gone out to run errands, leaving the baby in my care for just a few hours. I held her close, feeling the weight of her tiny body against mine, tracing the familiar contours of her face with trembling fingers. She looked up at me with those big, trusting eyes, and I realized how fragile she was, how much she relied on the people around her. The thought of what Jason had done, and how easily he betrayed us all, hit me like a punch to the chest. I was crying softly, unable to stop myself, when the baby cooed and reached out, wrapping her tiny fingers around mine. In that moment, I felt an unbearable mixture of love, guilt, and despair. She was mine, and yet she wasn't really mine, at least, not in the way she should have been. My daughter was her lifeline, the one keeping her alive in more ways than one. And still, I couldn't bring myself to tell her. Later that evening, when Lila returned, I tried to act normal, tried to push down the storm inside me. She greeted me with a smile, and my heart broke all over again. She had no idea that her little sister was also Jason's child, that I had crossed boundaries that should never have been crossed. She treated me like a mother, a guide, a confidant, while I carried the knowledge that I had betrayed her in the most intimate way imaginable. Weeks turned into months. I became a master of compartmentalization, learning to act, to smile, to participate in our family life while keeping the secret locked away in the deepest corner of my soul. Every laugh, every milestone, every small victory became a reminder of the lie I was living. And yet, through it all, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of relief. My child was thriving, nourished and loved, even if not by me. But secrets have a way of twisting the truth, of creeping into the smallest cracks in our carefully constructed lives. One afternoon, I found myself alone in the kitchen, cleaning up after breakfast, when I overheard Lila talking to a friend on the phone. She was laughing, carefree, talking about how lucky she felt to have Jason in her life, how he was such a good father to Aaron. And in that laughter, I heard the echo of my own guilt, the reminder that nothing was safe, that the truth I carried could erupt at any moment. I thought about confessing, about finally unburdening myself, but the fear held me back. I thought about what it would do to Lila, to Aaron, to my baby. I thought about what it would do to me, to the fragile remnants of our family. And so I continued to endure, watching, waiting, surviving, loving in the shadows, aching in silence. There are nights when I lie awake, listening to Lila's soft breathing from the next room, imagining her curled around my baby, humming the same lullabies she sang to Aaron. I sometimes reach out to touch the child, to feel the warmth of her body against mine, and I wonder if the universe will ever forgive me for what I've done. For the life I've created, for the love I've stolen, for the trust I've broken. And yet, even in the midst of this unbearable weight, there is a strange kind of hope. I see Lila, strong and loving, navigating motherhood with grace and patience. I see my child thriving, nurtured and cared for. And I remind myself that, for now, this fragile balance must hold. Because some secrets are too dangerous to reveal, and some lies, no matter how heavy, must be carried in silence. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up, or what will happen when the truth finally surfaces. But for now I love, I endure, I survive, and I wait, trapped in the shadows of my own making, for the day when the world will no longer feel safe for secrets. The following morning, I thought it was over, but I was wrong. It started like any other day, sunlight spilling softly across the living room, the sound of Aaron's laughter drifting from his little bedroom, and the rhythmic hum of Lila rocking my baby in the corner. I wanted to tell myself I could keep living like this forever, that the fragile peace we'd maintained would hold, but deep down, I knew it couldn't. It happened when Jason came in, early, unexpected, holding a coffee cup, and wearing that infuriatingly charming smile that used to make my heart race in dangerous ways. He looked at the baby in Lila's arms, my child, and I saw that same look of pride and affection he had for Aaron, completely unaware that the child he was praising was his own, born of a betrayal he didn't even acknowledge. I wanted to shout, to throw the cup across the room, to rip the truth out of my chest and finally let it all explode. But I couldn't. Not yet. Lila looked up, smiling warmly, and Jason leaned in, brushing the baby's cheek gently with his thumb. I couldn't breathe. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop looking, to stop imagining what could happen if this secret ever came out. And then, in that small, quiet moment, the baby reached for him, grasping his finger with a tiny, unsteady hand. It should have been innocent, a normal gesture between father and child, but to me, it felt like the world was cracking beneath my feet. Days bled into nights, each one filled with this unbearable tension. I felt like a ghost trapped in my own home, watching my daughter care for a child she thought was only mine, while I carried the knowledge of Jason's betrayal like a live wire inside me. Every laugh, every gentle coo, every shared secret between Lila and Jason was a blade twisting deeper into my chest. And yet I stayed. I watched. I endured, because my child needed me, and because no matter how much I hated myself, I couldn't abandon her. It was a rainy afternoon when it finally happened. I'd been pacing the living room, trying to make sense of my emotions, when Lila came in, holding a wet towel and frowning at the mess Aaron had made with his paints. She dropped the towel on the couch and sighed, tension etched across her face. I wanted to tell her everything in that moment, to unburden myself and let the truth finally breathe, but I couldn't. The words caught in my throat like thorns. Jason came in then, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor, and I saw it, the ease with which he moved between us, the familiarity, the trust. My daughter laughed at something he said, tossing her hair back, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, to hide, to disappear from this life I had ruined. My baby gurgled happily in her sister's arms, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling around her. And that's when it hit me. No matter how carefully I guarded my secret, the weight of it was growing, pressing down on me until I felt like I might collapse. Weeks passed, and the tension became unbearable. Every meal, every conversation, every bedtime story was laced with unspoken truths. I found myself avoiding Jason when I could, watching my daughter a step behind her every move. I felt like a prisoner in my own house, chained by my mistake, trapped in a life I hadn't intended to live. And yet I couldn't leave. I couldn't abandon my child to a world without care, without love. The breaking point came one evening when Lila laughed at something Jason said, her hand brushing against his, and the baby cooed in response. It was an innocent, perfect moment, but to me, it was catastrophic. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the edges of my sanity fraying. I wanted to confess. I wanted to tell Lila the truth about her little sister, about Jason, about everything. But I knew that the revelation would destroy her, and I wasn't sure I could survive watching that happen. And then, something unexpected happened. The baby, my child, reached out to me, her tiny hand clutching my finger. In that moment, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in months, clarity. This child didn't care about secrets, about lies, about who had done what. She only knew love, and she only needed care. And I realized that my role, my responsibility, was not to confess and wreak havoc, but to protect her, to ensure she grew up surrounded by love, even if it wasn't in the way it should have been. I sat there, holding her hand, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. I knew the tension wasn't over, and I knew the truth would eventually surface. But for now, in the small bubble of warmth and quiet, I could survive. I could love my child. I could watch my daughter nurture her without letting the weight of my sins crush us all. And so I carried on. Each day was a delicate dance of appearances, of careful glances and measured words. I laughed when I could, offered encouragement when it was needed, and stayed silent when the truth threatened to spill. I was living in a fragile equilibrium, and I knew it could collapse at any moment. But in that delicate balance, I found a strange, painful kind of hope. Hope that my child would be loved. Hope that Lila would remain blissfully unaware, and hope that I could endure the storm I had created. Because in the end, love, even love tangled in betrayal and mistakes, was worth surviving for. My child's small hand in mine, the sound of her coos, the gentle warmth of her body against me, reminded me why I endured, why I stayed, and why I loved despite everything. What came next changed everything. I had convinced myself that I could survive in the shadows forever, that the delicate balance I'd created could hold indefinitely. But life, as it often does, doesn't care about our careful plans or our desperate attempts to contain chaos. One evening, everything unraveled in a way I could never have anticipated. It started with a small comment. Lila was changing my baby's diaper, humming softly, when she laughed and said, "I don't know why he didn't get this from me. Honestly, I think Jason takes after someone else entirely." It was innocent, teasing, and I froze. My heart seized. That offhand remark, casual, meaningless to her, carried a weight I could not ignore. I tried to steady my breathing, to act normal, but my mind was already spiraling. Jason, who had been sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone, looked up, a smirk forming on his lips. He clearly realized where the conversation was heading, or maybe he just felt the tension in the room. For the first time in months, I saw him hesitate. And that hesitation, that tiny crack in his polished exterior, gave me a dangerous clarity. I knew then that the secret could no longer remain buried. My daughter, the woman I had loved and protected all my life, deserved the truth, messy, painful, and utterly shattering though it might be. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words pressing against my chest, and I spoke. "Lila, there's something you need to know," I said, my voice trembling, my hands clutching the edge of the changing table. She looked up, concerned, sensing the gravity in my tone. "It's about your little sister and Jason." Her eyes widened, and I saw the unspoken fear creep into her expression. "Mom, what are you?" I cut her off, unable to stop myself. "Jason, he's the father. He's your sister's father." The silence that followed was unbearable. Lila froze, her hand still on the baby, her mouth opening and closing as if trying to form words that refused to come. I wanted to disappear, to hide from the look of horror and betrayal that spread across her face. My heart shattered as she processed what I had just told her, the words hanging in the air like a storm cloud, threatening to drown us all. I don't understand," she whispered finally, voice cracking. Why?" "Mom." I wanted to explain, to tell her about my loneliness, my mistakes, the desperation that led me to do something unforgivable. But the words felt hollow, inadequate, like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. I made a mistake," I said simply. "A terrible mistake. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you, and I love your sister, and I needed to protect her." Her hands trembled as she held the baby closer, and I saw the first flicker of anger, a raw, piercing anger that was aimed at me, at Jason, at the world. Both of you betrayed me. You betrayed us," she said, voice rising, tears streaming down her face. "How could you?" I had no answers that could make sense to her, no words that could undo the damage. I could only watch as the world I had tried so desperately to keep intact crumbled around me. Jason looked down at his hands, shame and guilt finally breaking through the facade he had maintained for so long. He opened his mouth, but no words could come that would fix what had been done. The days that followed were a blur of confrontation, tears, and impossible conversations. Lila confronted Jason, confronted me, confronted the unbearable truth of what love and desire had wrought. And through it all, my baby, my daughter, remained innocent, blissfully unaware of the chaos her existence had caused. I cradled her often, feeling both the weight of my sins and the purity of her trust, her dependence, her need for love. It was messy, it was painful, and it changed everything. But through the chaos, I began to see something fragile emerge. Forgiveness, slow, hesitant, and unsteady, but present nonetheless. Lila didn't forgive us overnight. She didn't forget, but she began to see, in the cracks of our fractured lives, the undeniable truth that love, even tangled with betrayal, could survive. That a family, broken though it might be, could still hold together if we chose to care for one another. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if the wounds will ever fully heal, or if the betrayal will haunt us forever. But I do know this. My child is loved. She is safe. And I am learning, painfully, that mistakes, even unforgivable ones, do not have to define the totality of a life. There is room for love, for redemption, for rebuilding, even after the darkest secrets are revealed. And so I survive. I love. I endure. And I hope that one day, Lila will understand that even in my worst moments, my heart never stopped beating for her little sister, for the family that, in spite of everything, still exists.